Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the recent imposition of new sanctions by the UN Security Council on the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Let's get back to our panel. Yonho, I want to start with you. The United States recently had a proposal to deploy a controversial missile shield in South Korea, the so-called THAAD system. Now, China is very concerned that the deployment of the system could intensify an arms race on the Korean peninsula. Could this in some way complicate the relationship between China and South Korea?
Yes, I think we are already witnessing the souring relationship between South Korea and China compared to the, improving, atmosphere, or a very friendly atmosphere, at least between the two leaders. President Park Geun-hye, she really tried hard to woo China to be on her side, and she even took a risk of annoying Washington, if you will, by attending a huge military parade in Beijing last year. And there was even a huge controversy over the possibility of South Korea tilting toward China at the expense of its relationship with the United States. And in that context, the initial responses from China to the fourth nuclear test at the beginning of this year was kind of disappointing from South Korea's point of view. And that was one of the reasons, I think, why the Park government decided to play this THAAD card, I think.
Amitav, of course, the situation has seemingly got to an impasse right now. We see a lot of problems, but does it also pose an opportunity for all the parties involved to resolve this issue? What do you see as the major opportunities here, and of course the pitfalls that lie ahead?
The main opportunity, of course, is the new spirit of a new understanding between the US and China. But let me just put some caveats to any sort of maybe excessive optimism on this. For one thing, it is possible to see why China is now coming out so strongly against the North Korean nuclear program is partly because of the pressure of the US deploying a missile shield in South Korea. China doesn't want that. So by being a little more flexible and coming to deal with this issue with in cooperation with the US, may be a way to deflect or try to discourage the deployment of a US missile shield in South Korea. Now, that's one possibility one cannot totally ignore. And the other thing is, just because, there is a bit of optimism that great powers can manage nuclear proliferation. We had the Iran nuclear deal, right, giving a bit of optimism. But the North Korea is a very different animal. And it's not Iran. It's desperate for regime survival. Regime survival is far more important for North Korea than it was for Iran. Iran is a country which has great power ambitions. Our ambitions should be at least a regional power, and it can make some concessions. So North Korea is going to fight to the bitter end, I would say. So let's not be too optimistic about how easily this can be resolved, despite the fact that we have a very positive development in the sense that China and US have a much more of a common ground.
Ambassador Hill, you mentioned earlier on those joint military exercises that were being carried out by the United States and by South Korea. Now, of course, we hear about this United States proposal to deploy a missile shield in South Korea. It's causing problems, a rupture slightly in the relationship with China. How does this complicate the situation? As you pointed out, those exercises have been long scheduled. They take place every spring.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I think the U.S. ROK, Republic of Korea alliance, is an essential element for stability in the region. And I think everyone knows that, including China. So what is an alliance? An alliance is when you have an agreement that one side will come to the defense of the other. And so the way you do that is to make it credible. And so you have to have the troops working together, exercising together. And that's why there are these annual exercises. exercises. Otherwise, it's just an alliance on paper. It's not a real alliance. Secondly, with North Korea threatening and explicitly threatening other countries, most notably South Korea, with its medium to short-range missile technology, it seems that if that alliance is going to be real, the United States needs to work with the ROK on a defense against that kind of threat. Obviously, the Chinese don't like this. They fear that this could become a bigger deployment than just against North Korea, and it could somehow have an effect on China's own nuclear deterrence. But if you stop to think about it, it's very clear what has to be done if an alliance is to be credible in the eyes of the American people, and in this case, especially credible in the eyes of the South Korean people. So that's what is happening. And obviously, it's something that the U.S. and China need to have an understanding about, a clear understanding that this is not directed against China. But I think the problem here continues to be North Korea's unwillingness to deal with anyone and to address the central issue, which is their threatening posture toward other countries in the region with these nuclear weapons. And by the way, I do not accept the notion that these nuclear weapons are essential for their regime survival. If that regime does not survive, it will not be because of whether they have nuclear weapons or not. It will be because of the impoverishing of the North Korean people by this North Korean regime.
Yonho, what is China's view on the deployment of that missile shield? Does it fear, as Ambassador Hill just pointed out, that this could be the beginning of a bigger deployment? And does China feel in some way that this could undermine its nuclear deterrent capability?
Well, first of all, I need to say, at least it's really wrong timing to discuss the deployment of the THAAD in South Korea between the ROK and the USA, because all of the three countries are now focusing on the cooperation on the very urgent issue of the nuclearization challenge by North Korea. And the deployment of a possibility of deployment of the THAAD really make a big hit on Chinese back. So the big strategic influence on THAAD is, you mentioned, that will make an strategic imbalance here, and that will force China to make a rebalance by making reactions. So I'm afraid with the deployment of THAAD, not only the complicated relations between China and the ROK, and also more complicated relation between China and the United States in this very sophisticated Northeast Asia because of the arms race in the anti-missile systems and missile attacking capabilities. The race, the competitions between the powers will be triggered.
Amitav, there is a bit of a track record here insofar as how the United States handles nuclear proliferation. We saw that in the deal with Iran. You mentioned that a moment ago. There is a piece in Foreign Policy magazine which says that the United States needs to engage with the DPRK rather than just issue threats and impose sanctions. And the DPRK itself made that point in 2002 when Kim Jong-il wrote a letter to President George Bush at the time saying that it's prepared to negotiate in good faith if the United States recognized its sovereignty and if the United States assured it that there won't be aggressive moves made against it. Can that be used as a basis to get somewhere?
Well, the times have changed since that letter that you're talking about. And I think, of course, negotiation is always good. There's always a possibility that negotiation can lead to something. But we have to combine negotiation with a certain amount of pressure. And at the current stage, for the past couple of years, North Korea has not given an indication of getting into serious negotiation. In the past, it did. And so that could have been, there could have been some missed opportunities. And again, I have different views on this from maybe officials of the U.S. government on this, who have worked in this field. But currently, I think the North Korean regime doesn't look like it's ready for negotiations unless there is some amount of pressure. And I think that therefore this development with the Chinese putting on more pressure is very, very positive. But I also would like to say that at least the Obama administration has always been very open about so-called negotiating with the enemy kind of posture. It has been part of its foreign policy philosophy, and that has worked in some places, and that hasn't worked in some places. I still think regime security is very important for North Korea, and I do think it has something to do with its obsession with nuclear weapons, and maybe I have a difference of views on this with Ambassador Hill. But there are, of course, other things that could come into play. But I think I would always do both, as our Chinese friends say, carrots and sticks. Yeah. So you have some sticks and you increase the amount of pressure, but also you do offer some opening and some sort of a carrot as well. Some
kind of relief. Well, we shall see how it all unfolds. We're going to have to end it there, though. We've run out of time. Thanks to all of you for joining us.